Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy, and I am a representative of EHN Canada. We are a nationwide network of treatment centers for addiction, trauma, and mental health. And we have facilities located in British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. We offer high-quality inpatient, outpatient, and online treatment programs. For more information, please visit our website at www.ehncanada.com. Just for housekeeping, everyone is on mute and cameras are off for today's webinar, but please feel free to use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions. Again, please use the Q&A box rather than the chat to ask your questions, as we want to ensure we can get to your question. We will try to get to as many questions as we can at the end of today's session. And then please remember, this is a professional and inclusive space, and offensive commentary will not be accepted nor tolerated. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out a follow-up email sometime late next week that will include a copy of today's recording, the slides being presented, and any additional resources, as well as your CEU certificate. I will remind everyone again throughout the presentation, but we will be sending out all necessary resources. I am located in Toronto. Toronto is located on the traditional territory of several nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. It is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. We also have presence today at our facility, Edgewood, that is located in Nanaimo, British Columbia. They are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the traditional territories of the Sunimuk First Nation, and Vancouver is on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. If you are new to this work and you want to find out whose land you are on or grew up on, please visit www.native-land.ca. Many more of you may be physically present elsewhere, and I encourage everyone to use the chat function to, where applicable, share whose land you are on. Now, to get to today's session, the impact of mental health and addictions on the family, we have Debbie Browser. Debbie is the Family Programs Facilitator at Edgewood Treatment Center in Nanaimo, British Columbia. This role supports families impacted by addiction, trauma, mental health, and/or maladaptive habits in finding the right program within the EHN Canada network. Prior to her role as Family Programs Facilitator, Debbie spent 7 years as an admissions coordinator, where she also supported families and loved ones in their search for appropriate treatment. Like many people, Debbie grew up in an alcoholic home, and when her mother got into recovery, Debbie started her own journey with recovery. This journey is also something that Debbie shares with compassion and care when providing hope to families. She has a background in healthcare and continues to be a proud member. Please help me welcome Debbie.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you everyone for joining me today. I am passionate about the work I do here at Edgewood with families, and also I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. Recognize the importance of working with families and recognizing that they have been greatly impacted even more or as much as their loved one who is in active addiction, struggling with mental health, or just entered treatment. So today, what we're going to look at is I'm going to explore with you what codependency is, that the relationship that develops and the behaviors that develop as a result of dealing with someone who's not well, a loved one who's not well. We're going to look at the 3 areas that I guess I looked at the 3 areas that families struggle with the most when first, bringing loved ones to treatment or dealing with loved ones who are active in addiction. And then we're going to look at self-care, because this is something families and family members and friends, it's pretty well non-existent, and it's crucial in moving forward in their own recovery post loved one's treatment. So starting off, looking at what codependence is, I love this little animation or cartoon. What do you want to do? Whatever you want to do. So it's really about, when we talk about codependence, it's about over functioning in someone else's life and extremely under functioning in your own. It occurs when we put other people's needs first on a fairly consistent basis. And fairly consistent basis is the key. And you may have also heard the term people pleasing. Family members worry about upsetting a loved one. There's this core value that a lot of us grow up with, and that is if we're not putting others first, we're selfish. And so this sense of self is lost, and family members often feel frozen to make a decision. So this cartoon really articulates well. You know, nobody here can make a decision on what's going to happen next. So I love this. Do you feel compelled to help your loved one? Are you afraid what will happen if you don't? And this is what is going on in most family members' minds when they're dealing with someone who is struggling. You know, we put our feelings. I'm just gonna just had to move myself out of the way. Families desperately want to help their loved ones overcome destructive behaviors and feelings, and they often feel disrespected or abused and cannot figure out. Sorry, I'm having issues this morning. So go back to that. I have things overseeding things here, so I have some technical issues going on. So families desperately want to help their loved ones overcome their destructive behaviors, and they witness the struggle. Family members often feel anxious much of the time. They are desperate to improve their situation. And in this state, you know, family members are willing to do almost anything to make their loved ones feel better. And yet, we don't, as family members, always give assistance in appropriate ways. We often families often respond in panic. And there is nothing easy about loving someone who is not well. And often families are afraid if I don't rescue, if I don't put that Superman, Superwoman cape on and go in and save the day, or put my loved one out on the street, awful things are going to happen. And the codependent dynamic insists on families saying yes most of the time. And, you know, we teach people how to treat us. And so when families are saying yes and really wanting to say no most of the time, this is when we really engage in those people-pleasing behaviors and put ourselves on the back burner. And we're implicitly giving permission to be treated poorly. And we're going to talk about boundaries in a little bit and how that is crucial and important in moving forward in communicating with loved ones in recovery, and also with individuals who are still struggling with mental health and addiction. So I'm a nice person, aren't I? When we always put other people's needs first, the belief is I'm a nice person, aren't I? And family members often are left feeling disrespected or abused and cannot figure out why. So they pour on being this nice person a little heavier, and no matter what the reaction. So core values of family, it's about the core values of family, putting others first, not being selfish, and what will people think. I am nice, but I don't say yes because I'm always kind. I do this because I want to avoid upset. I want to avoid criticism. And the whole idea, it's being accepted and valued. That's most important with families who are engaged in this dance of chaos and insanity. And it, for a lot of individuals dealing with someone who's not well, in their family of origin, they grew up with this core value. And it was a survival strategy for a lot of us. So truth is, when we're always putting people's needs first and saying yes when we really mean no, we're protecting ourselves from potentially painful consequences when someone is disappointed, angry, or frustrated with us for not doing what they want us to do. And there's that fear of loss of control. And so the codependent dynamic insists on me saying yes most of the time, and family coming to expect this. And it's difficult, but not impossible to break this dynamic. Going back to what I mentioned just a few moments before, is we teach people how to treat us. And so we forget our power and we give it away. We engage in these people-pleasing behaviors and we implicitly give permission for our family members to treat us poorly. And a few slides down, we talk about boundaries and how setting boundaries teaches our family members how to treat us in a different way, in a healthy way. So enabling and caretaking, I wanted to do a slide on this because these are enabling and caretaking behaviors are indicative of codependence. And when we're engaged in this dance of chaos, we take on a lot of the same, family members take on a lot of the same behaviors that our loved ones are exhibiting or displaying. We just act them out differently. The behaviors that are different for us are the enabling and caretaking behaviors. So as family members, how would we know the difference? We don't get a handbook on this when we start dealing with our loved one who is not well. When we see a loved one suffering, it's normal to feel concerned and want to help. But worry and this hypervigilance, we cross the line into this all-consuming obsession. And so when we talk about individuals struggling with addiction and mental health, they are all obsessed and about protecting what's going on for them. And as family members, we're all obsessed about trying to fix and control what's going on for our loved one. And sometimes we think, you know, I just soften the blow a little bit, if I give my loved one a chance to get back on their feet, grow up, get better. This was just a one-off. Enabling means supporting an individual in a way that removes the natural consequences of their actions. So when family members are trying to fix and control what's going on with their loved one, there is that trouble with saying no. There's a great deal of guilt that comes along with having to say no, and it's easier to give in and say yes. And when we enable, there's this immediate relief. So short term, some behaviors may work. We make compromises, The intention is to protect ourselves. And these are ways, just going back to what I mentioned, the survival strategies that some of us may have learned growing up. We want to help, but we also want to avoid. So some of us were taught that feelings were not safe, they were not okay. So we want to avoid confrontation. And we want to control, because control equals safety. So long term, both parties sink deeper into dysfunction, because there's just this endless cycle. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same or different results. So when we continue to enable other people and do for them what they can do for themselves, or get help from appropriate people or facilities, we unwittingly encourage these dysfunctional behaviors to continue. And for family members, that's really hard. For when I start working with families, that's something, the enabling and the word enabling is hard for some families to swallow. I hear from a lot of families, Deb, I'm coming from a place of love. And I say to families, I don't doubt that you're coming from a place of love and worry, but there is a point where that crosses the line. And when we remove the consequences, we're saying to our loved one, it's okay for you to continue on in that behavior. And so this is an area where families need a lot of support and work, and it's a process. And so as their loved one enters treatment, this is something, enabling caretaking, that we're working with right off the hop. Because the first thing individuals will do when their loved one enters treatment, we'll reach out, and the first question I have is, how is so-and-so? How are they doing? Right? There's this over concern around how their loved one is doing. Are they okay? And who I'm talking to on the phone, their needs, they don't even know what they're feeling or what they need. It's all about, how is my loved one doing? So acceptance, it really goes back to change. And when individuals are trying to get their loved ones help or have loved ones in treatment, there's a process going on, and it's change. And when individuals come into treatment, and I'm working with families, say as positive as all of this is, it's change, and change is very, very uncomfortable. And so acceptance is something we're talking and working with families around every day. It's facing and coming to terms with what is. And most families, when they're dealing with someone who's not well, are often in the state of ruminating. We often call it the committee in the head, or the hamster brain. They're upstairs, and it's what ifs, and it's the worst case scenarios and stories. And we're not focused on what is the current reality. So every day in society, we're faced with either accepting or rejecting reality of that particular day or circumstances. And our current circumstances include, who we are, where we live, where we work, how much money we make, what our responsibilities are. And some days are a breeze. Some days we go through the day and everything's working out well. Our relationship is great. House is organized and clean. Everything's wonderful. However, there are days when, things aren't going so well, and our kids are acting up, perhaps, or a job is lost, relationship breaks down, something has happened, problems arise, things are different and changing, and we're losing something, and circumstances have been altered. We have a new situation to accept. At this point, we are uncomfortable and may deny or resist the change, problem, or loss. And we want things to go back to the way they were. And often when I'm working with families, as much as this is all positive, as I mentioned before, familiar is comfortable. And there were some good things in the relationship prior to loved one getting help. And often it's, I want to go back to the way things were. This is hard. This is difficult. This is uncomfortable. And so we work with families, acknowledging and accepting these are your current circumstances. This is where your loved one is at, and accepting where their loved one is at. You know, whether that be in treatment or still struggling, but accepting this is where we're at today. And that really is the turning point for change. Now, having said that, some families can remain stuck here for a bit, and I often say it's okay. Everybody's journey, as we are well aware, working with individuals here in treatment, every individual's journey is different, and that's no different for families. And so we meet them where they're at. And for families to change and engage in their own recovery and learn to have a healthier relationship with their loved one and learn to set boundaries, we must start here first. Acceptance around, you know, the things I can and cannot change. It goes back to the old good old serenity prayer, and it's accepting reality. Often when we can accept this, then change can begin to happen. And often when I'm speaking with families on the phone, it's really putting forth the point that being in the present moment, right? Getting out of the committee in the head and being in the present moment. What is true? Like in this moment, what is true? And often I can get them to my loved ones in treatment. That this is what is happening today. And then they can, you know, carry on and perhaps think about, okay, what do I need? And for some, they're not even there yet. So acceptance is something that can take a little bit, and it is one of those areas that we work on greatly with families, and it's an area that needs a lot of work when families are looking at doing their own work and wanting the relationship to be different with their loved one. Boundaries. So we talk about boundaries often, and in our workshop, this is something we say boundaries are crucial in moving forward with it, you know, in a different relationship with your loved one, a healthier relationship, communicating in a healthy way. So when we look at the definition, it can be defined as something that indicates a border, edge, or limit. It preserves the integrity of what is inside and outside. And prior to individuals coming to treatment, and even when individuals are in treatment, accountability, number one, prior to loved ones getting help or who are active in an addiction and struggling with mental health, boundaries are non-existent. Accountability and responsibility are non-existent on our loved one's part. And when we look here, preserves the integrity of what is inside and what is outside. And prior to individuals coming to treatment and still struggling, that is a mesh. That is, you know, they're blurred. there is no inside outside. There's a huge overlap there. And so when we're working with families, we put forth the idea and we reiterate that boundaries are ultimately about taking care of you. And boundaries are about, when you set a boundary, boundaries are for you to clearly communicate how you want to be treated and what behaviors you're okay with and what behaviors you're not okay with. It goes back to the enabling and caretaking, right? And how you want to be treated. When we're working with families, we say, when you set a boundary with your loved one, you want to continue this relationship with them. You don't want to end it. The whole idea of setting boundaries is to preserve the relationship. And a lot of families, I think at first, it's when we use the word boundary, it's like, well, if I say no, or if I'm firm in my beliefs of what is, this is what I will put up with, and this is what I won't put up with. I'm going to hurt my loved one. They're going to leave me, and we reassure families this is about preserving and having a healthier relationship. And families with loved ones who are in active addiction or diagnosed with a concurrent disorder can set boundaries to limit the impact of a behavior. So it really goes back to when we set a boundary, we're communicating clearly, this is how I want to be treated. I no longer want to be treated poorly. And we often say too, there's going to be resistance. This is change. When you start to do your work, there is going to be resistance, and it's crucial. So effective boundaries can assert the needs or rights of families so they feel more secure and respected. We talk about when we're dealing with someone who's not well, there's this insecure attachment. When we're able to set boundaries, have clear limits of this is how I want to be treated, then the attachment can be a healthy, secure attachment. So again, it's inviting the other person to be more responsible for their behavior. In treatment, individuals are given chores, responsibilities to do, and it's about showing up and being responsible and accountable. When people are active in addiction, they often take advantage of those individuals closest to them to get their needs met. I'm often very honest with families when individuals first come into treatment. I'll say to them, you were a means to an end. Their primary relationship, their focus was their addiction. And it's often difficult for families to hear that because, as I mentioned before, they initially were jumping in and coming from a place of love. And so when we are able to set boundaries, we're allowing our loved one to be accountable and responsible. And we're modeling a healthier and safer way of relating, changing that relating pattern. Because what I say when I'm working with families, a lot of families will say to me, Deb, my relationship was a healthy relationship. I had a healthy relationship with my loved one. And what I say to that individual is, when we're dealing with someone who is not well, when we're engaged in that dance of chaos and insanity, that the relating pattern is not healthy. And so boundaries are that tool or those tools in which we can create a healthier relating pattern with our loved one moving forward. And setting boundaries with a loved one in active addiction is often a necessary step to protect us as family members from the chaos and from being manipulated and used. And oftentimes, boundaries have been set, and that is what leads individuals to treatment. Often a bottom line or boundary has been set, and loved one makes that choice to come to treatment. In short, setting and keeping boundaries are necessary to preserve our self-worth, our self-respect, and our sanity. And in the beginning, our self-worth, we talk about individual self-worth being very low, and self-respect and self-esteem pretty well non-existent, and that's the same for families. It mirrors, a lot of this mirrors. And individual family members, when individuals first come into treatment, are at this place of helpless and hopeless as well. And it is because they were unable to set boundaries. So if I'm constantly breaking or moving the boundaries, it's unlikely that individuals will respect those boundaries. And we often talk about following through with boundaries. So you can say you're going to set a boundary and not follow through that boundary. And what I say to families is that's where the change needs to happen, is that is a threat. When you say, you know, if you do this, I'm going to follow through and do A, B, C, and D. And that consequence is not followed through with. Individuals in active addiction or new to recovery know this. Oh, mom has said this before and she's never followed through. I can continue on with this behavior. I can continue on doing what I'm doing. So boundaries are something we do a lot of work around with families moving forward. And as they do the work, they see that boundaries are, you know, just important and crucial in my work environment, with my other family members, with friends, because it's about clearly communicating how you want to be treated. Now, when individuals first come to treatment, family members don't know what their needs are because they've been so all consumed and all obsessed with trying to fix and control what's going on for their loved one. They really don't know at that moment what their needs are or really how they want to be treated. So they have their own journey and their own work to do, and boundaries is a big part of that. So defining, setting, and keeping a boundary often needs resetting and modifying, because as behaviors change, you may not need that boundary anymore, and you may see another area that you need to set a boundary in or with, or with that person. And we often say this process is helped if family members support each other and you have support of professionals. I often say to individuals, practice setting boundaries. Before you do this with your loved one, practice your boundaries with someone you trust, you feel safe with. That may be your counselor, therapist, your sponsor in a 12-step family program, or support a friend or family member. But practice, because this is for most family members, this is brand new. This is not something they're used to, and it can be very uncomfortable and scary. So key point is you can't change someone else, and I think this is one of the harder concepts for families, because when their loved one comes to treatment or hasn't yet come to treatment, there is this false sense of thinking that if I try a little harder, I am going to get them to do what I want them to do, and I can change the way they feel. I can change how they're going to respond. And what we work on is, okay, what you can change is how you're going to respond. What feelings come up for you, and how are you going to perhaps prevent that behavior from happening again? So those uncomfortable feelings that you're experiencing right now, you don't, continue to experience those. And when we're able to accept the things we cannot change, being our loved one and what is going on for them, and recognize, okay, this is the only person and the only opinions I have control over and feelings are my own. And once we're able to define, okay, this is what I'm going to set a clear boundary around, and you continue to follow through with the boundary, it invites the other person to change. Change affects change. And I have a little plaque in my office here: if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I often recite that to my family members, because we can keep going in this cycle and hoping for something different. It's not going to happen. So when individuals come into treatment, one of the biggest things that's happening for most is they've been isolated. And for family members, it's no different. When family members are in the throes of dealing with their loved one who's active in addiction or has just arrived in treatment, they have often been isolating or are isolated. There's shame and embarrassment of what has been transpiring. We, as family members, don't want anybody to know what is going on behind closed doors and in our family. And so often we distance and we are isolated. And so when individuals come to treatment, one of the first things families will say to me is, Deb, how can I support my loved one? How can I support them in returning home when they come home? I want to be able to support my loved one in their recovery. Well, what I say to them is, you need to support yourself. You need to do your own work. And oftentimes that's getting out of the house and connecting. That opposite of isolation is connection. And getting well. Connection is, in here, we're telling, and every day putting forth that recovery involves community, a program, whatever that looks like for individuals in treatment. You can't leave here and do this on your own. You need support of a community. You need support of a program and individuals like-minded. It's no different for family members. However, when individuals first come to treatment, I hear it's not my problem, it's their problem. I don't have the problem. My loved one has the problem. And I always say, well, newsflash, this impacts the family system. You have been impacted by this. You have taken on behaviors that are not working for you. There's things going on for you right now that are not, your life is not going well as a result of the impact that your loved one's addiction or mental health has had on you. And in order for you to get better, you need to connect. You need to seek out mutual support groups, counseling, therapy. It's connecting to individuals who are going to help you see the areas you need work on, whether that be changing behaviors that aren't working for you, taking care, and we're going to talk about self-care here in a little bit, but taking care of areas in your life that you've put on the back burner for so long. And when you engage in a mutual support group, such as Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, Family and Friends Smart Recovery, you're there with other individuals who have shared similar experiences. You're able to, you have the safe space to share your worries, your successes, and it's really an area, a group where these individuals help you to remember to place the focus and keep the focus on yourself. Because prior to loved one getting help, and even with loved one being active in addiction and struggling with mental health, focus is not on self, definitely not. And it's not about doing this alone. So connection, acceptance and boundaries, these are all areas where families really struggle. And this is something we are continually working daily in our, whether that be our workshops or on the phone. This is something we're discussing daily with family members. So on this slide, I've got examples of the others: CODA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, and Family Friends, Smart Recovery, and counseling. A lot of us as family members don't seek out counseling because, again, it's not our problem, it's our loved one's problem. And when that comes back to that acceptance piece, is that I have been impacted, accepting I have been impacted, I do need help. And this is where families can struggle, and families are a stubborn bunch. I lump myself into that category. And it takes, I've heard from families going back to the support groups. Why do I have to go to a meeting? I've done all these other things. I've got my loved one to treatment. I'm doing these other things for my loved one who is active in addiction. It's their problem. Why now I have to take an hour out of my week or 2 hours out of my week for them? Again, now I'm sacrificing myself for them. And bringing it back to, this isn't just about them. You've been greatly impacted. And this is about you. This is for you. This isn't for your loved one. This is for you. So self-care is something family members struggle with. I think this area is one of the areas that loved ones struggle with the most because it really feels wrong initially. When we ask families to broach the idea of self-care, when we think initially about self-care, for most we think, well, having a bath, going to the spa, those kind of things. That's what I think a lot of families think when we first put forth the idea of self-care. And it's a foreign concept for them because for so long they've been putting others' needs first. And implementing this practice, I say to families, is uncomfortable but crucial. And when I'm working with families, I use that analogy of the oxygen mask. It's a perfect analogy for self-care. It simply makes sense, because if you cannot breathe yourself, how are you going to help anyone else continue to breathe? And by taking care of yourself, then you're able to take care of your loved one. You're able to support your loved one. So the next few slides, I have taken this from Candace Platter's book, Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. She's a Vancouver clinician who practices in addiction and works with families in addiction. And she talks about the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And when we look at physical, it has anything to do with our physical bodies. And implementing physical health, overall physical health, is crucial. And often, for family members, that's not happening. Regular exercise, sleeping well, addressing our own medical needs, seeing the doctor, that's not happening. And so in her book, she talks about baby steps, and this is something we work with families. We talk about get outside for 10 minutes, go for a walk. Some individuals had a gym membership, or still have a gym membership but haven't gone in months or years. Get reacquainted with going to the gym or running practice. So important. So this is really about, if I'm taking care of myself, then I'm able to support my loved one. Emotional, looking after yourself in ways that help you feel grounded and balanced. And so we talk about, this can be a daunting task. Again, it can be when I'm speaking or working with families, it's as simple as going out for a supportive walk, out for a walk with a supportive friend, or counseling, right? Finding out from friends or another professional of a counselor who may be a good fit for you, but just start there, investigating who may be a good fit for you. Journaling, right? Getting those thoughts out of our busy brain and onto paper. Gratitude, being grateful, getting families to think about every day, just 3 things they're grateful for. What happens is they're able to focus on the things that are going well in their life rather than the things that are not. And I talk about in some 12-step programs, there's the acronym HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. We don't always know what's contributing to our emotional confusion. And it may be, hungry, we may not have fed ourselves today. When I'm talking to families and we talk about this, I'll have somebody laugh and say, I haven't had breakfast today. I haven't even thought about feeding myself today. Angry, right? So there may be situations that families haven't resolved with a family member or a work colleague. Lonely, connection, right? Either connecting with a support group, connecting with a friend, connecting with your partner, connection. And it's so important because, like I said, isolating is something we do very well as family members when we're struggling. And tired. A lot of us are not, especially when our loved ones first enter treatment or an active addiction, we're not getting a lot of sleep. And so it's getting help with that, whether it be napping or seeing the doctor or a counselor to work through those underlying issues of your own. So mental, it's important to have, a healthy brain, have active mental abilities, and often when individuals first come to treatment, families are left feeling scattered, right? They've been dealing with chaos and putting out fires here, there, and everywhere, and often up in headspace, ruminating. And so most families, whether their loved one is in treatment or still struggling, there's a lot of confusion and feelings of being scattered. And so we talk about how important it is to stimulate our brain and exercise it. And so it may be, when I'm talking to families, examples of activities, maybe reading, crossword puzzles, board games, attending night classes or college class, volunteering, and engaging in stimulating conversation. Who knew that would exercise our brain? But these are things that maybe a lot of you are saying, okay, this is something that I do every day. But for families who are impacted by mental health and addiction, this is something foreign, something they haven't been doing. Spiritual. So this means different things to different people. And often when we first talk about spiritual or spirit, individuals say, well, I'm not religious, I don't go to church, and I quickly say that's not what this is about, right? This is about that non-physical part of you, the seat of your emotions, your character, the soul. And it's about this, you know, as humans, we seek harmony between body and spirit. And often families can wrap their heads around that their loved one who's in treatment is experiencing a disconnect there. But when we broach this idea with them that perhaps you're experiencing a disconnect, you know, they pause. And when we have that discussion around, you know, what that means, for some, it is a religious meaning, it is faith. But for others, it's meditation practice, it's yoga, it's getting out in nature and connecting with nature. For others, it's their recovery group, right? Their 12-step group. It's really about a belief that makes sense for you, and we put forth at whatever meaning or spiritual path people want to reconnect with or try, and make sense for them. That's what they should be engaging in. And that's what will be right for you. And baby steps for some may be reconnecting with a meditation program, practice, or yoga practice, or getting reconnected with a church group. It's really about learning how to nourish your soul and giving yourself what you need on that level. And often families are at a loss, right? They've put themselves on the back burner for so long. They really don't know what their needs are in the beginning. And so these are areas where we do a lot of work because they're not recognizing the impact. A lot of families don't even think they have been impacted until we start doing the work with them. So on the very end here, I have this little handout of what we do here at Edgewood with families, what our family programs look like. So we do a monthly family education workshop webinar. And in that 3 half days, we're looking at what is mental health and addiction, boundaries, and how important boundaries are moving forward in your relationship with your loved one, codependence, relapse behavior prevention. What does that look like? And then we're excited to say we're bringing back our Insight program. That's something we had run at Edgewood for years, but COVID had us shelf that for a few years. But that is an on-site program that is coming back to Edgewood. And it's an opportunity for families to digest what they've learned in the family education workshop and explore the impact of family patterns, the impact of mental health and addiction. We look at self-care more closely and self-compassion, communication and connection, relationship dynamics and spirituality. So it's a great opportunity for families to do a little more in-depth look at self and placing focus on self, because for families that's the most uncomfortable step, is placing focus on self. Our Bounce Back Children's Program, that is something we had to shelf, and it's something we haven't brought back quite yet, but are working diligently because there is a need for children, to help children understand and learn more about addiction and how they've been impacted by it. So this is something we're hoping to bring back later this year. And family conferences, so Marlene and myself work here at Edgewood. We're connecting with families over the phone as soon as individuals enter treatment. And we're also involved in family conferences. So family conferences are a time where families are involved in their loved ones' treatment process, and it gives them an opportunity to articulate the impact their loved one's addiction has had on them. So that is it. So I'm going to stop share.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was great. We do have a couple of questions, but I think one that's specific to this will be like going off of what you just spoke about for EHN specific. They're just wondering if these family programs are only available to people who have a family member at an EHN program.
No, so they're available to anybody who wants to learn more, because we have a lot of individuals reaching out to us who have families who are active in addiction and are wanting help and wanting to learn more about how they can take care of themselves and move forward. In hopefully, what I think when individuals first come to the webinars and the workshops, I think they're hoping they're going to learn how to fix their loved one, and they soon realize, okay, this is about me. And when I put focus on me and I start making the changes, then my loved one is going to hopefully change and ask for help.
Perfect. And then there's lots of ask too about these family education webinars. So I'll make sure to include that as part of our follow-up email as well.
Awesome.
Looks like lots of people want to register, so that's great.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, perfect. Well, unfortunately, that is our time, but I will include, like I said, resources that will be a great follow-up for this conversation here. And then, yeah, Debbie, again, thank you so much for your time, your insight, your knowledge. We really do appreciate it.
Well, and thank you for your patience with my technical. I had glitches happening with my slide, so I had to close it and open it. So
it's all good. It's all good. It happens to the best of us, right? We appreciate it. Thank you so much again, Debbie. And thank you to everyone for your attendance today. As a reminder, we will be sending out a follow-up email that will include today's slides, a copy of the recording, any additional resources mentioned, as well as a copy of your CEU certificate. We will send that sometime mid to late next week. And then a webinar invite will be getting sent out on for February 23rd's webinar on suicide ideation. Thanks so much. And until then, take care.